Good morning. Today is Thursday, February 18th, and this is a meeting of the Senate Committee on Ethics. I'd like to start with a prayer, and I'd like to ask Senator Robertson to join us, lead us in an invocation. Senator Robertson.
If you'd each pause with me and bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord God, for the rain. We thank you for everything you give us, Lord God, knowing before we do what we need, what our needs are, and not what our wants are, Lord God. Bless us today. Let wisdom and compassion be the front of our thoughts. Let us be kind, and let us treat each other like the brothers and sisters that we are. We ask these things in the precious name of your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to acknowledge that we've got some breakfast refreshments coming in. I want to thank the Georgia Association of Realtors for that support. Early morning like it is, I'm grateful for that, for Jeff Ledford and for Brad Mock and for Betsy Bradfield. I want to make sure that anyone who is here today who needs some audio assistance, see our staff so that you can gain that. I'd like to point out that this is a busy morning, and we'll be taking a number of bills under consideration. We have already heard two of those bills in subcommittee. SB 89 and SB 67 were heard in subcommittee. We will not take additional testimony this morning. If you have written testimony, we'll be happy to accept that. Then on Senate Bill 184 and Senate Bill 188 and Senate Bill 40, we will be receiving testimony. There are sign-up sheets at the rostrum. If you'd like to speak to those bills, you're welcome to do that. First order of business is the approval of the Senate caucuses. We have one caucus for review. It is the Working Families Caucus. I would note that there are two or three minor adjustments. Under caucus chair, it is Senator Nan Orrock. If you would just strike the two representatives, since this is a Senate caucus. And at the bottom, if you would acknowledge that the House Ethics Committee approves a similar caucus in the chamber, and we did, so the answer there is yes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the Working Families Legislative Caucus. I have a motion by Senator Robertson and a second by Senator Butler. Sorry. Give me a break. Senator. I'm sorry, Senator Harrell. Thank you. That's exactly right. I appreciate that. All those in favor of approving the Working Families Caucus? Thank you very much. I see a positive show of hands. Thank you. Said yes. Okay. Working Families Caucus. Family as amended, has been approved. We're going to move on now to our agenda item. The first bill will be Senate Bill 89 by Senator Miller, President Pro Tem Miller. Senator Miller?
Would you like me to address the group from here or from the podium?
Whatever you're most comfortable with.
It's your pleasure.
I think he's already moving to the podium, so we'll take that presentation from the podium.
Feel like I'm walking through a laurel thicket to get there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to present today, and thank you to the members. I have Senate Bill 89, and we're working from LC 280084. And as a full presentation, this is the Elections Assistance Officer, and this will be a new position created and employed by the Secretary of State's office under the supervision of the Elections Division, be appointed by the State Board, and would be serving at the pleasure of the State Board. The Chief Elections Officer would have extensive experience managing and conducting elections, and they will also be required to have experience in training poll workers and poll officers. And they must have at least 5 years experience in county elections as a county election superintendent or an election supervisor with skill set pertaining to management, budget, finance, knowledge of state and federal law, and general personnel management. The duties of the elections officer will include managing and overseeing the system that supports the county election superintendents. Would include but not be limited to coordinating training for these officials. The chief elections officer will be charged with establishing a list of how he might assist or she might assist in conducting elections, third-party specialists, auditors, consultants, or otherwise. The state elections division would identify state resources to support the lowest performing election superintendents and give them assistance where and if needed. There will be a responsibility for identifying and recruiting individuals who would serve as coaches to assist the Secretary of State and State Elections Board. The criteria for assistance, the board is charged with developing criteria to identify low-performing counties and opportunities to improve elections functions, procedures, and processes. Previous election law violations would certainly be addressed. Elector inconvenience in voting due to poor election administration or excessively long lines, failure to adhere to established practices and in elections management. The performance evaluation would be set from each district. Low-performing chief elections assistance officers would be assisted. The chief elections assistance officer would conduct an evaluation to ascertain the county superintendent's performance and if they needed coaching or assistance. Third-party specialists, as we mentioned earlier, would be able to conduct on-site evaluations and offer best practices in coaching. The county superintendent fails to implement the corrective measures, the board may suspend the county superintendent from exercising any powers and duties, and the board would be able to appoint the replacement. The replacement election superintendent will serve for a period of time under the direction of the board, and the compensation will be paid by the county for which they're serving. There would be opportunity for a petition for a cure. So if this election supervisor was not doing the adequate job, they have an opportunity to improve. The superintendent would have 30 days after their notification to make changes. The board would then must provide the superintendent with at least 30 days notice prior to conducting a reinstatement hearing. Reinstatement hearing would take place within 90 days of the petition, and the burden of the reinstatement hearing will rest upon the superintendent to prove that they have been or were able to correct the deficiencies. Should the elections board determine the superintendent will be more likely to improve the administration of the elections correction deficiencies, the superintendent will be reinstated. And that is the long and the short of the bill. And I think this will be an opportunity for low-performing superintendents, low-performing jurisdictions to improve, but also give them an opportunity to cure. If you will, if I could address if I could ask the committee to direct their attention to lines 68, 69, lines 68 through 77. I would like to offer, I'd be open to an amendment here. I don't have it prepared, but I do have it prepared. I beg your pardon. On line 69, let's begin on line 68. At the end of line 68, through the elections assistance officer, we would strike offer and would say shall cause such election superintendent to have, and we'd strike the opportunity to have, at the expense of the state, a comprehensive on-site evaluation. Skipping down to line 72, we would strike the word to between procedures and assist. Skipping down to line 74, we would strike the word to between the words or and provide. And that would be the only amendment that I would be offering. And I think that we might ask Chairman Strickland if he'd offer that amendment, and if he can, then.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Chairman Strickland, would you be willing to make President Pro Tem's recommendations in the form of a motion?
Sure. Can you do that now?
Please. So we'll know exactly what bill we're talking about.
So on line 69, we're on LC 280084. Line 69, you would strike the word offer after shall, replace it with cause. So it'll say shall cause such county election superintendent. On the same line, you would strike the opportunity, but leave to have there. And so the line would read, assistant officer shall cause such county election superintendent to have. And then on line 72, when it says to assist the county election superintendent, you'll strike to. And on line 74, you'll strike to between or and provide. So it'll read or provide any of the necessary support services.
Thank you, Senator. Does that meet the wishes of the author?
That's correct, and I would stand for any questions and ask for the committee's favorable recommendation.
I recognize the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pro Tem, yesterday there was a guy that spoke on behalf of your bill with an organization I didn't know, Happy Faces, I think. Do you know? Oh, he is? You're in the room?
Yeah, he is. Yes, sir.
I'm not putting words in your mouth when you said you thought it was a good bill to have the extra training. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I understand we're not taking further testimony on that. But I just wanted to either this or this so I can, okay, I got a north-south on that.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't know exactly what that group does, but I know that they were involved in the elections this last time. Do you know anything about them?
I do not.
Okay.
And also, Mr. Leader, the testimony from ACCG was favorable as well.
That's right. That's right. I knew who they were, though.
Are there other comments? Yes, Senator Harrell. Just a second.
Yes, thank you. I feel a little bit in the dark this morning because when this bill was being considered, was it yesterday morning? Yeah. I was in a subcommittee meeting that was at the same time, and there was no streaming, so I couldn't go back and watch any of the testimony. So I feel a little in the dark, not just because it's 7 a.m., but so if you'll, take my questions, that would
Certainly be
help.
delighted to.
So this feels a little bit like kind of like No Child Left Behind for election offices, and that you're identifying low performing and coming in to help, which is similar to what we do for schools. But elections, I think, can get a lot more heated. So as you determine these low performing election offices, how do you make sure that partisan motivations don't come into that process? And these third party companies that come in to help, who are they, and do they currently exist? Do you have any examples of them? Do they use these in other states? Is there anything like this in other states?
Going back to your original question, you had about 4 in that statement,
I
I
did,
think.
yes.
So the first question was, if I'm not mistaken, I did present this and go over this in your caucus meeting. And we have had the bill for anyone's review over the last week and a half or so. So I would offer those solutions to your circumstance of being a little bit in the dark. But I would also say that what was your next question? I'm sorry, there were several.
Well, how do you?
Oh, the low performing. How would
How
you
do you
determine?
make sure that there aren't?
I beg your pardon. I
partisan-
recall. This
Yeah.
is done by the elections board. So the elections board is a bipartisan board, as you're well aware.
Mm-hmm.
It has appointments that are made specifically to keep it bipartisan. And I think it's from the majority party, the minority party, the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to
Right,
look
which
that up.
I think it's 5, and like 4 Republican, there's like 1 Democrat.
Well,
so it's
and I
sort
would-
of bipartisan.
And Secretary of State has one as well, yeah. And I would offer that has probably changed over a period of years and it's gone back and forth. And
Okay,
then
and
your
then-
other question was regarding what kind of organizations, what kind of consultants, what
do
kind of
they
services
exist?
might
Maybe
be
some
available.
spoke at the
I think
meeting, I don't
those
know.
I think those are readily available. I think we've had several presentations. I'm sure you've seen them as well, where people come in and they demonstrated whether it's their voting machine or their best practices or those kind of things. Those vendors or consultants. The difference between a vendor and a consultant would be, I think we spoke earlier this week that a consultant would be someone from out of town with a briefcase, charges a lot of money, and a vendor would be someone who supplies a service.
And the last part of the question was, are there other states that do this?
I'm not aware, frankly. I've not researched that. So,
Thank you, Senator. I want to correct a procedural position. Senator Strickland made a motion to amend. I need a second for that. I have a second. Thank you, Senator Burke. We'll continue with discussion of SB 89. Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from Augusta.
Looking at this particular bill, and I had a couple of questions about it on yesterday, and I agree with one of my colleagues. It actually reminds me of the chief turnaround officer that we had a few years ago, which basically now is gone, because of the fact that what you're doing is, to me, is really duplicating services. When you look at it, you're asking the person to work under the Secretary of State, which presumably right now is not doing a good job. Supposedly, that's why we're here, but they're going to work under the person that we're somewhat saying is not doing well. But the other troubling fact of it is they work under Secretary of State, but they work at the pleasure of the Elections Board. Well, if that's the case, doesn't that, in any type of bureaucratic situation, become kind of troubling? So you're answering or you're working under the Secretary of State, but you're at the pleasure of the election boards. How is that actually going to work as a practical matter? On the issue of training, which we talked about yesterday that training is available for your election officials. And then it turned to like poll worker training. But the fact of the matter is the bill basically says officials, and it's really geared towards election officials. And there's a whole lot of training that's available. It's a certified training program that's available right here in the state of Georgia that I believe is actually mandatory. And then as far as other training for other officials, there's training at Auburn University, there's training throughout the United States, there's training at Hubert Humphrey Political School, which is an online course. You can go through the list of all the various trainings that exist. So when we say we're going to coordinate training, what does that mean? Does it basically just mean that this person is going to set them up for one of these training courses that they can already set themselves up for today? Is that really necessary to create a whole nother office? And I'd ask the point about the difference between third-party specialists and consultants. Well, that's important because we're saying the third-party specialists as though they're specialists, and we actually list out what their specialty would be. Well, what is a consultant doing? And it's not, we make the joke that they're going to carry a briefcase and charge more money, but are they a specialist? What's their role? What are they here for? They're not a specialist, because we have third-party specialists. They're not an auditor. I'm not really sure what the purpose for auditing. They're just a consultant, but we don't even know what they're consulting for. All of that to me is just bad bureaucracy, quite frankly. And then we also have in here about best practices, as though we don't know what those best practices are. Well, the fact is the National Conference of State Legislatures lists out the best practices and also tell us where to go find the best practices. They list various organizations that you can actually go get best practices from. So we're not searching for best practices. We already know what those best practices are. And if we are searching for best practices and we don't know what they are, how are we holding anybody accountable to best practices that we say we don't even know yet? But we do. National Conference of State Legislature, you can go and it will tell you what the best practices are. But if we don't know what they are, how are we going to say that someone's low performing when we're saying we don't even know what the best practices are?
Does the senator have a question?
And so that was, I thought it was just meant for comment. I'm sorry, Chair. So those were just the issues that I had with the particular bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Senator Strickland.
I have a question, Senator Miller. When it comes to who the person is working for, the Chief Election Assistant Officer, on lines 24 and 25, aren't they appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the State Election Board?
that's correct.
And so while they are underneath the office of Secretary of State, they do report directly to the Election Board, the ones that appoint them and also serve at the pleasure of, correct?
That's correct.
The other question I have, it was brought up whether or not we're the only state in the country that's doing it this way. Are there other states in the country that have 159 different ways of conducting elections?
Probably not, sir.
Is this one thing we can have uniform around our state? I mean, I've only got 3 counties that I represent directly with District 17. But even with that, I hear from poll workers, Republicans and Democrats from all different counties saying they're getting different stories of how to be, as far as their training. They're seeing different practices implemented for better or worse. Wouldn't this provide some sort of uniformity for my 3 counties, for example?
I think that we discussed in the previous subcommittee meeting 159 counties conducting elections 159 different ways.
And while that's one of the unique things about Georgia, wouldn't it be good just to try providing extra resources to those that are struggling, don't have all the resources, aren't getting it as right as other counties? Is there anything wrong with trying some extra training?
There's nothing wrong with trying some extra training. There's also nothing wrong with trying. We're not finding fault necessarily with the elections jurisdiction, but maybe individuals within there. Give them the additional training.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on this bill. Motion from Senator Gooch.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion we do pass LC 280084 as amended by Chairman Strickland.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second from Senator Anabatarte. All those in favor of the motion and the second indicate by the uplifted hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Chair notes 4. But happy to accept dissenting position if the senators so choose. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Pro
Mr.
Tem.
Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee.
Okay, we'll now move to Senate Bill 67. Chairman Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'd like to remove my mask while I speak, and if anybody feels uncomfortable, if they're too close, give them a second or two to move with outside of 6 feet. I want to be sure we are safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Duly noted.
Thank you. Senate bill, first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing my bill. I want to thank the committee members for being here at this early hour and for all the hard work all of you all do for your constituents and for all the Georgians. Senate Bill 67 is a measure to address inconsistencies in our identification requirement for requesting absentee ballots. In inconsistencies in current code and in current practices. It is an attempt to provide a easily verified way to confirm that the person requesting the ballot is indeed who they say they are, and that live ballots are only issued to legal voters. There is nothing in here that is an attempt to make it harder to vote or to obstruct people from being able to vote by absentee. It is simply a measure to kind of bring our code up to what is currently being practiced as practices have changed over time, and especially in this past election cycle due to COVID. The bill also codifies what is already happening, which is codifies that the Secretary of State's office can establish a web portal and establish and maintain a web portal to allow people to request an absentee ballot through this web portal. We passed a bill last year out of the Senate Bill 463, to do that, and it got pretty far through the process in the House, and due to COVID, did not make it into final passage because of our abbreviated schedule and how long it took us to get through bills last year. But so I've got a substitute for you today that is, I think, a strong improvement over what I presented in the subcommittee yesterday. I'm presenting LC 280201S. This substitute addresses some of the concerns brought up by the minority party yesterday with regard to adding what they perceived as adding a burden, an unfunded mandate on local boards of elections or local registrars. This addresses that issue, and since we had a subcommittee hearing, I'll just speak to the changes, but I'll be happy to answer any questions about the entire bill at your discretion, Mr. Chairman. So the changes that we made were line 56 through 59. If the elector is unable to fill out, we're striking line 56 through 59, and you'll understand why as I tell you about the other changes. We strike starting on line 95 after the word "and." We strike that all the way to line 97. And we changed the word "verifying" to "verify" on line 97, verify the elector's identity. And then we strike all of section starting at line 118 to through 133. And so what we're doing here is we're going to a easily verified method of identifying somebody that is requesting an absentee ballot, and we're eliminating the signature match requirement that is in current code. So whether you request your ballot through the web portal, if you request it through mail, we're going to identify the voter based on their Georgia state driver's license number and their date of birth, or their state issued ID number and their date of birth, or if they do not have those items, then there's already in the code a list of other acceptable IDs that they can provide. So it makes the process uniform so that we are sure that the person that is getting a ballot, a live ballot, is indeed who they say they are. I don't know how you could argue against this. I mean, it's not I don't see anything in it as a partisan issue. I just think it is a efficiency issue, and it provides stronger election security so that we don't have somebody or try to tighten down somebody's ability to fraudulently request an absentee ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other questions?
We went back and forth some at the subcommittee meeting regarding the first-time voters and people who don't have driver's licenses. I think there is some confusion out in the public about how those people are handled. I think for a large majority of the people, this is a great process and worked well. The portal worked well for most people during the 2020 elections. I think that the chair said something about 98% of people have driver's license. That number seemed a little bit high to me, but we talked about that last night, and we're gonna look into that. But even if it is 98%, and there are 2% left that don't have government-issued ID or driver's licenses, I'm concerned about those 2%, and I do think there's some confusion. I know my own son's girlfriend went in person to request an absentee ballot, had a driver's license, showed the driver's license. They said that wasn't good enough. She had to have a utility bill, which was just wrong. So there is confusion out there about how to handle these people. So could you I think it would help me I did study the bill last night more. I think it would help me, I think it would help the public if you could just explain exactly what are the options available and the requirements for people who do not have, those first-time voters or people who don't have driver's licenses or state-issued IDs. What are their options under this bill?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. So a lot of our legislation, and this is where, you know, I'm not an attorney, and even if you are, I think it can get confusing because this bill references other sections of the code that addresses what you're asking. So it addresses, as far as code section 21-2-417, list out what the proper identification is for voting or requesting a ballot. And number one is a Georgia driver's license, which is properly issued by the appropriate state agency. Number two is a valid Georgia voter identification card or other valid identification card issued by a branch, department, agency, or entity of the state of Georgia, any other state or the United States authorized by law to issue personal identification, provided that such identification card contains a photograph of the elector. Number three is a valid United States passport. Number four is a valid employee identification card containing a photograph of the elector and issued by any branch, department, agency, or entity of the United States government, this state, or any county, municipality, board, authority, or other entity of this state. Number five, a valid United States military identification card, provided that such identification card contains a photograph of the elector. Number six, a valid tribal identification card containing a photograph of the elector. For first-time voters, there's an exception. First-time voters, that's in Part C of this section, they can provide a copy of a current utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or other government document that shows the name and address of such elector. So that's my understanding of all the various forms of identification that you can provide. I assume, and somebody with more knowledge than me can maybe answer this, but I assume the reason there's an exception for the first-time voter is if somebody recently moved into the state and is indeed eligible to vote and has registered to vote, but has yet to get a Georgia driver's license or a photo ID of all these other kinds. So I assume that first-time exception is for a new resident or somebody that I guess turned 18 and hasn't yet gotten the other photo ID. The next time they vote, they would go back to Section A and have to have one of those that's listed.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Senator Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, if you vote in person, you're required to have an ID, as we know, when you go vote in person, correct?
Yes.
And then if you vote via the portal, you actually enter an ID number on the portal, is that correct, and your date of birth with
Yes,
that?
sir.
And then, but if you vote by absentee, not using the portal, that's where we get into the signature match, correct?
On request, this only deals with requesting the absentee ballot, but yeah, so
Under current law.
I learned through working on this that on your ballot, if you do a mail-in ballot application, the elector can sign the request for the ballot, or really any of their family members can sign. So the elector is not always the one signing the ballot request. So the signature match just is not a good way to verify who's requesting the ballot, because sometimes the elector is not the one signing, or I think your point, if you do it through the portal, there's no signature. So I think this cleans all that up and makes it a lot more secure process.
Well, it seems.
And the only people I can think of that would oppose this are people that are trying to fraudulently request an absentee ballot.
But it seems like with the signature match, sometimes the outcome of the election decides what position you take on an issue. But it seems like before, I know before the pandemic, when it first started last year, before we got into the primaries, there was a lawsuit over how we do signature match in our state. been a lot of discussion about that. And so it does seem, to me, I support getting away from this extra class of voting, if you will, extra way of voting, into something that's uniform. Last question, though. There's different thoughts on how this is done. I think there's different bills on this. Does your bill require somebody to actually print a copy of their license or their ID at home and put that with the application?
No, sir.
And
It does not.
So I've been concerned about that because somebody does not have a printer. I don't have a printer in my house. I know my grandmother, who votes by absentee every time, does not have a printer, but she does have an ID. And so I was concerned about actually requiring somebody to put a copy with their application. So your bill would actually require instead just entering the number, same way somebody would do with the portal. Is that right?
That's correct, Senator, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. The chair recognizes the distinguished Senator, Senator Harbison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, just a second, Senator.
I apologize, I couldn't hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines of Senator Strickland, I'm sort of confused about how you will protect the information that, and maybe I missed it, but the information that is submitted. Do I put my driver's license number on there? And how is that exposed? Who has access to my, somebody can take that and do whatever they want and do some fraud with that kind of thing. We're getting off into some privacy things, I think, that's going to eventually hurt. And I know you're trying to cure a problem in your mind, but the truth of the matter is, I think you're opening that privacy door up. So help me understand how that information will be protected in the mail or however it's presented to the election office.
Well, we're not requesting, we're requesting your driver's license number, which does not carry the same level of privacy concerns to me as, say, a Social Security number. But it's obviously you're filling out a form and you're putting it in an envelope and you're sealing it and you're mailing it or dropping it off or at the Board of Elections office. And so if we're going to have mail-in ballots and trust that our ballots are secure through the mail, then why would we not trust that our request for a ballot is secure through the mail? Personally, oftentimes when I cash a check or purchase certain items, I have to provide my driver's license number. Yeah. It's commonly required in all kind of commerce, and I would I would argue that we give away more private information on this smartphone every day than the risk we take by putting a driver's license number on an absentee ballot request. If you want to get government benefits, you've got to provide identification and personal information. If you want to fill a prescription, if you want to buy a cold Budweiser, you got to show an ID. That to me just is not I'm not saying that identity theft can't happen. I'm not, but I think I think the value of this is way higher and better than any potential risk of that happening.
Okay, and you mentioned the passport, if I may continue. You also mentioned passport. And make me understand, I'll take a copy of my passport, or I'll take my passport number and attach it or put the information.
In the instance
how do you check that with the federal government? How do you do that?
Well, the passport, you would, in that scenario, you would actually have to mail in a copy of your passport with the ballot request.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Harbison. Other questions? Senator Harrell, hold it. One question, Senator Harrell. You've already had an opportunity.
I understand. It's just this small percentage of people that don't have driver's license is the thing that keeps nagging me. So the portal, you said they don't have to print, but they do have to print if they have to use these other forms of ID. Unless the portal allows you, where you would enter your driver's license number, allows you to, if you download a copy of whatever that identification is, can you then upload that onto the portal? If you're a first-time voter or
No,
somebody
I
who
think
doesn't have a driver's license
I think you have to
number?
mail it in if you do
Okay,
that.
then you do need to print copies or take it in person. If you're doing a utility bill or a copy of a employer ID or those kinds of things, you would have to print that.
You know, I think obviously we all agree that voting is really a sacred right for us, and it's a right we want to certainly protect. We don't want to put obstacles in the way of legitimate people voting. But you know, I think that it's so important that we have security in the vote and confidence from the public in the voter security, that yes, there are instances in a very small minority of the people that they're going to have to make a little effort if they do not have a government issued ID to provide some other form of identification. And there's, again, all throughout our economy and through just daily business transactions, that's a common requirement. And people that don't have a state of Georgia issued ID number can easily get one, and it's free of charge to them to get one. And you know, I think those people are accustomed when they go to do other type of transactions having to provide some form of identification, and I don't think this is an undue burden at all. I would really appreciate bipartisan support on this bill. I think it's a very, very good measure.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gooch, the distinguished.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Walker, on line 96, last line of page 4, it talks about the signature or mark. Can you tell me what a mark is of an elector? And then I want to ask a question about identification.
That's been struck.
I know
that
it's been
was struck.
struck, but we're striking it. But what is a mark?
I think it would be for somebody that does not write, is illiterate.
So how would the elections office be able to verify that mark?
There is no mark.
They would not. I don't think.
And one
they
other
would.
comment. What I have in my hand is a copy of my Georgia weapons carry license. If you go to any elections office in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, you can get almost an identical card, but it says Georgia voter. I have one. I thought I had it in my wallet, but it's at home, free of charge. So this is the simplest thing you can get, unless they've stopped issuing those in the last couple of years. Anybody in Georgia that's a citizen of Georgia living in their community can go and get this card for free, and that would be your ID. So identification's not a problem, but there's 100 places throughout the state that you could think of that you have to have some kind of an ID. Last time you got on an airplane, you had to present some kind of an identification. This gentleman right here is a law enforcement officer. How many times a day did you ask for an identification card from someone for whatever reason? Not just in a vehicle, but walking down the street. We're a nation of laws. We are used to having identification cards on us. Our children in schools today have identification cards on them. So I just can't understand anybody opposing requiring some kind of identification in order to present to an elections office to prove who you say you are. That seems like a fundamental basis of our nation as a citizen. So I appreciate you bringing this bill, and I look forward to voting for it.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the distinguished minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we keep confusing mail-in piece of paper with your ID on it with walking into the wine store, which is what I would probably do, and show my identification, not give it to them to keep. There's a difference in mailing something in and getting to keep it and put it in a file than it is going in a store and showing it. I have asked many times when I've shown my ID, what did you look at on my ID? And I've had people say your birth date. And I've had other people say, I just looked at it. So that tells me they didn't look at much. So there's a huge difference in mailing something in, filing it away, and keeping it than it is me just walking in and showing it and the person read it and you leave. So I think we need to stop confusing that because that is not a correct statement.
Madam Leader, can I address that?
You sure can, Mr. Chairman.
They already have all that information. That's why they're able to verify that the application is coming from who you say you are. They already have all that information. You're not providing them with any information, that they don't already have. That's when you register. This is people that have registered to vote that are requesting a ballot. If you don't want to register to vote, if you don't want to turn over your private information, what you consider private information, don't register to vote. Don't vote. Don't request a ballot. But if you want to vote and you want a secure election system, which I think we all want, I hope we all want that, then this is a common sense measure to ensure that.
A newly registered voter is not already on file.
They've registered to vote, so they've already provided private information to be able to register. So,
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. One more question. We recognize Senator Robertson, Chair.
And I hate to speak with my back to the chairman, but to speak to Chairman Gooch's point, all 159 counties do provide those voter registrations in their electors' offices.
Fine. Thank you.
State identification in the state of Georgia is free. The 2% number is a unique number. If it is 2%, that's a very small number. We provide a lot of Meals on Wheels and other programs in the state of Georgia, and if the creative people in this room cannot come up with a program to carry people to get their identification, the free identification that's available through the state of Georgia, we can certainly set something up like that. And finally, when I hear about the integrity issue that the minority leader brought up about the driver's license and trusting these people in the election office to store some information and be able to protect that information. And the story that Senator Harrell brought up that I have heard before about somebody carrying a piece of ID into the voter registrar's office and still being denied, then I think what we're doing there is we're making a strong argument for the President Pro Tem's bill too. So I think with this bill here, we solved that one problem, and then with the first bill we heard before, we solved the problem that the other two senators have brought up. So it sounds like to me we're discussing some good legislation and an opportunity to solve a lot. But the problems that I'm hearing about, these minute problems, and I hate to bring my profession into it, these are not problems. The theft that's taking place in Georgia today is happening on this thing. It's not happening on a piece of paper. Let's give criminals the credit they deserve. They're much more sophisticated than we realize. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. The chair will entertain a motion. I need a motion to do pass by committee substitute. Is that correct? I have a motion, do pass by committee substitute by Senator Miller, President Pro Tem. Is there a second? Second from Senator Gooch. All those in favor of a do pass by substitute indicate by the uplifted hand. Thank you. All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Again, we welcome a minority position if you choose to submit one. We're going to adjust the order of our bills this morning because we have 3 more bills. We're going to move to Senate Bill 40. Senate Bill 40. Senator Jordan.
That's right. Ms. Jordan, brother. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take off my mask. I appreciate y'all hearing this bill. I'm unsure how familiar everybody is with the absentee ballot process at the county level, and so I don't mean to be simplistic about it, but I think it's important in terms of understanding what this bill seeks to do. So absentee ballots are submitted by voters in 2 envelopes, and I'm sure some of y'all have actually submitted absentee ballots that are sitting in here. So the first envelope, you actually put the ballot in. Can you hear me? You put the ballot in and you seal it, and there's no identifying information on that. You then put that sealed envelope into another envelope that actually has the voter's identifying information, including the permanent residence, which is on file with the Secretary of State's office, and that's where you sign the elector's oath that you have to do when you vote in person as well. When that reaches a county elections office, what happens first is that they verify that this is a voter in the system. They look at the signature or the mark, and they also look at the identifying information, which is the permanent address. With respect to the signature, they compare it to everything on file, driver's license, registration card, whatever it is. And then, of course, they do also the other information. Once it's been verified, the outer envelope is separated from the inner envelope. The outer envelope is put somewhere for purposes of record keeping, and I think they have to keep that for a number of years. The inner envelope is kept sealed and put basically locked up until election day. Under the law as it stands right now, the inner envelope cannot be opened, and that ballot cannot be processed until election day. The problem with that, obviously, especially as we saw in the last election, is that a lot more people are choosing to vote via absentee, and specifically because of the pandemic. Because of that, the Secretary of State issued an emergency order that first allowed counties to process before Election Day. But to be clear, processing meaning scanning the ballot into the system, but not tabulating, meaning there isn't a count. And so what we saw is some counties take advantage of that, some counties didn't. I remember Chairman Robertson asking at one of the committee hearings as of Fulton County with respect to why they didn't fully take advantage of that in November. And I think we saw the backup and how long it took to actually process that, which of course ended up causing a lot of consternation for folks around the state. By the time we got to the January runoff, Secretary of State entered another order requiring that they actually pre-process the absentee ballots. And as y'all know, we saw a very smooth process after that. All this bill does is try to get in line with that so that counties can pre-process, not tabulate absentee ballots so that we can get results to people sooner and so that people can feel like their process is working, and it also takes a significant burden off the counties and local election officials with respect to Election Day. So I welcome any questions, and that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Senator Jordan. Question, Senator Robertson, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Jordan, does I have to confess I haven't been able to read through the entire thing. Does this mandate a time when they must start the pre-scanning of the ballot?
It indicates when they're authorized to do it. We've gone back and forth whether or not there should be mandatory language in the legislation itself, or if we leave it open to the Secretary of State with respect to regulations. Right now, this authorizes, but I certainly advocate actually for mandatory language, and if this actually gets through the Senate, that's what I would be advocating for on the other side in terms of changes.
So on the other side, you would advocate for mandatory language, so it'd be a shall as opposed to a may?
Yes.
And one quick comment on how simple that process is when you spoke about it, is that outer envelope is white and that inner envelope is yellow. So there is a very distinct difference in exactly how you explained it, that when they open that white envelope that has the personal information on it, and they reach inside and take that yellow envelope out, that yellow envelope does not have that personal information.
It has
on
none because we have to comply with the constitutional requirement of ballot secrecy in this
And,
state.
and all of that material is sequestered from each other once
That's
it's
right.
all out there. So I appreciate you breaking that down and pointing that out, because that's an important part, I think, that was left out of a lot of the conversation over the last few months. Thank
Right,
you.
and I can see where people could be confused.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had kind of the
Sorry, go ahead.
okay.
I'm listening.
I had kind of the same question about the shall or may. Is there a spot in here where we could make that correction now, so that in a fairly concise manner?
So I wish I could say yes. The problem is Title 21 is, as y'all are dealing with, is fairly complicated in terms of how it's structured.
Oh yeah.
And so when we were talking about this yesterday, about trying to make that change quickly, what we didn't want to do is have an unintended consequence based on a change that we think is simple and straightforward, and then it impacts something else. So I'm not sure, right? I guess we could put shall in there. But again, I haven't vetted that with respect to Ledge Council to make sure that there isn't, like I said, an unintended consequence.
I appreciate your abundance of caution on that. I guess kind of what I'm recommending, if we could do it, and you know your bill far better than any of us in the room, is kind of do the reverse of what you're talking about, and trying to insert the shall in the House side. I was thinking insert the shall on this side, and then it gives us time between now and the House that if we do find that there are unintended consequences, that we can make that corrective action then.
I'm amenable to that.
I appreciate that. I just don't know where and I'm careful how I word this to you. I don't know where I would stick it.
With respect to that, if we look at line 91, I believe if we strike be authorized and just have shall, that may affect the change with respect to making it a mandatory duty versus just allowing them.
So I understand you on line 91, strike be authorized to, and just say shall open. Is that?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right.
Is that in the form of a motion?
I deferred to the.
Defer to the author. Are you
Yes.
amenable to that?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I have a motion. Second. We'll continue to discuss. Thank you.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Senate Bill 40? Yes, President Pro Tem?
Based on the hour, I'll be brief. I wanted to thank the senator for bringing this bill. It's puzzling to me how sometimes we can, the state of Florida can count all their ballots before we have counties can count our ballots. And hopefully this would expedite and bring some consistency. So I want to thank the senator for bringing the bill.
Yeah, and I think the counties have gotten a lot of flack in the past for the delay and everything, when a lot of times they've been hamstrung by the law.
They've been hamstrung. I would agree.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. We do have public input on this issue. This bill has not been heard in subcommittee, so we'll pause for public input. Chair recognizes Nicholas Northam. Mr. Northam.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for giving us the opportunity to give input this morning. Again, my name is Nicholas Northam, and under affiliation, I put citizen, because I'm not here on behalf of any group or organization. I did want to mention, may it please the committee for me just to mention one thing that Senator Dugan mentioned earlier in reference to Happy Faces and myself and training. One, I would like to clarify, Happy Faces Personnel Group is a personnel group, a staffing company that helps Fulton County largely, as well as some departments of the state of Georgia staff, different roles, mostly on the lower hourly level. I held a short-term contract with Happy Faces in order to help Fulton County with different personnel issues in the election. But to be clear, I'm here as a rep of myself and not Happy Faces. I'm here because I want to help our government find non-political, non-politicized solutions to our broken election system. I think that would be a really nice step. And I just wanted to mention here today, especially on the training issue that he mentioned earlier, I'm 100% in favor of more thorough and standardized poll worker training, though just because of the way I was raised, I'm hesitant to add additional layers of government to that training if not necessary. I'm here today just to speak briefly about this bill 40 because I was in the room at State Farm Arena and later for some of the audits and recounts in the Fulton County absentee by mail ballot counting. I was there starting November 4th at about 4 o'clock, so missed some of the craziness that made the news before that. But I was there because once it was clear that extra people were going to be needed to help staff the ballot counting, Happy Faces stepped in and helped supply a lot of our already trained and certified poll workers to this process. So while I have read this bill thoroughly and I think there are some details that can be ironed out moving forward, especially as it goes to the House, I just want to be on the record as someone that was in the room who got many threats because I was walking around the room and was, on the news, on the B-roll, and people recognized me, and everyone had a position on how the absentee ballot counting process was going. I appreciate the bipartisan acknowledgement that counties were limited in our ability and taking a lot of the heat for decisions made about when counting and tabulation can occur. So while I have some questions and concerns and some changes that can be made moving forward on this bill, I just did want to say that I greatly appreciate the effort put forth in this bill to allow more flexibility to the counties to start counting and tabulating and opening as necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Norton.
In the volume.
We appreciate your input.
Of course.
Thank you very
so
much,
sir.
We look
Thank
forward
you.
to you addressing future legislation. Other comments or questions? Seeing none. Do I have a motion? I have a motion by Senator Butler. That's do pass. Is that correct, by Senator Butler? By substitute? As amended? As amended. Do pass as amended by Senator Butler. Thank you. Second by Senator Gooch. All those in favor indicate by the uplifted hand. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to the vote is unanimous. Thank you, Senator Jordan. Okay. We'll now move to Senate Bill 84. Senate Bill 84, Senator Caucus. Excuse me, 184, correct. Not 84. Senate Bill 184.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you letting me appear before your committee this morning with this legislation. This should be very quick. It is a small change to current law. And you can see in the bill it references the code sections 21-2-215, and that requires local boards of registrars to enter the voting history, so to speak, of a voter after the votes have been cast. They call this giving credit for voting. Of course, that's how, when you look up somebody's voting history, you can tell when they voted and when they haven't, and which elections, and that is a public record that's kept. It's useful for them to keep a current list of electors, people that are voting, who's still actively voting, but also to verify if somebody voted or not in any given election. This most recent election cycle really rocked, I think, public confidence in the integrity of our election system. This helps finalize the results. It also gives people certainty. I just can't tell you how many voters contacted me and said, how can I tell whether they actually recorded my vote? Did they show that I voted in this election? If I sent in an absentee ballot or I went, I want some verification. Well, this is how you do it. You can look at the voter history and see was your vote recorded. All this bill does is shorten the time period for local board of registrars, boards of election to report that, to do the verification there, to give the credit for voting from 60 days to 30 days, so that we get more finality quicker and people are able to verify that their vote was counted. It also gives a penalty here on the local boards of election requiring them to do it, and for each day beyond 30 days they can be fined $100 by the state election board.
Thank you, Chairman. A question from the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so how long, what was the time period, the average time period that we had in the state and each of the counties to get all these done after the last election?
Of course, the law required it to be 60 days, but there were many that went long past that. I think the average was in the 70s, 71 or 72 days to get the reports in. And there's no enforcement mechanism, no penalties, no consequences if the law was ignored.
Okay, so that's just putting a little teeth into.
Tiny teeth, $100 a day.
Okay,
It
thank
sends the message, we expect you to follow the law so that our citizens can feel confident in the voting system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Chair
you.
recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you
Thank
for the
you.
bill. Did you check other years rather than just 2020 of the count and how much time it took?
I did not.
So you based.
I don't remember us having this type of outcry.
That's
after
exactly
elections,
right, and that is my point. Because of the pandemic, we had more people voting absentee for safety reasons, and so previous years, people probably went to the polls, and we didn't have as many numbers. So that's why I'm asking you if you checked previous years, so you'd have something to compare it to rather than just 2020.
No, I didn't, but I don't see where that matters. I mean, you still had this obligation
I know
to
they
report within 60 days. And the votes are tabbed, I mean, you know who voted on election day. And so 30 days doesn't seem too long to be able to go ahead and do this,
But
just a
Mr.
reporting
Chairman,
process.
You don't know if previous years were late, if they went past 60 days, if you did not check the numbers.
We know they were supposed to, so all we're doing now is saying, still keep doing what you're supposed to, but do it a little bit quicker.
Well, I'm just opposed to shortening the time without more information on whether those days, whether those were counted in 60 days rather than 70 days, as you suggest, or 71 days.
Well, the votes are counted on election day. So this is just a reporting of something that had already happened. Should you give these boards 60 days to report something, to verify that, who voted, who cast a ballot, or should we shorten that to 30 days so people can get more finality here and can have some certainty that their vote got counted?
I understand, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Senator Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How are we doing today?
Hanging in there. Good to see y'all this morning.
You too.
Hard-working public servants.
Just a quick question, and you're the lawyer. I'm just a humble country doctor. On line 15, you've got subject to a fine of $100, but you described it as $100 per day. So I'm just wondering if was the intent, or.
It says on line 13 for each day beyond 30 days. So that, I think, answers your question. And I find I'm just a little old country doctor to be almost as scary as those guys I oppose that say I'm just a little old country lawyer.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
But it does, that's how it's worded.
Thank you. Thank you. The chair recognizes Senator Jones. I'm sorry, Senator Miller.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I wanted to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill today. That was relative to the minority leader's questions regarding punctuality and timeline and number of votes and so forth. I don't know what the statewide numbers are, but I know what the numbers are in my particular county. My particular county had sixfold. We had 5,000 absentee ballot requests in 2016. We had 28,000 in 2020, and the exponential growth in the work, even though there is exponential growth, we need to bring finality to the event. And whatever that, if you're playing a ball game when the final buzzer rings, that's the score. And so we need to bring finality to it. And I appreciate you bringing this bill. I think the length of time is very generous. In fact, I'd like to amend it and make it about 10 days. But that's really, and the $100 per day fine, I mean, that is minimal. So I applaud the gentleman from Athens for using the moderation in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from senators? Senator Harrell. Okay.
So this data documentation, can that be done before the vote is certified, or is it done after the vote is certified by the local?
It can
election?
be done before if they.
It can be done before. Did you, in the process of drafting this bill, did you speak with election directors in local communities to make sure that they can meet this deadline? I'm not an election director. I've never done the job, so I really don't know what all has to fall into place to get to that point. So I'm a little hesitant to.
Just reporting the names and numbers. I mean, who voted in your precinct? They have that data instantly available. They have it pre-election for the absentee ballot, so they shouldn't be accepting them from people that aren't registered voters. And they have them on election day. When you go sign in, you give your ID and your number. They're verifying your presence there. And that's all they're doing is reporting that number. I mean,
Sounds simple.
It's simplistic.
Sounds simple. But did you talk to election directors?
I didn't, but of course this bill's been filed and none have approached me or raised complaints throughout the state. And that's one of the beauties of the transparency of our system. When we file these bills, they go right on Secretary of the Senate's website and they're available for everybody.
How long has the
review.
bill been filed?
I can't recall the exact dates, probably 10 days or so, week at least.
Thank you. Senator Gooch.
Yes, sir.
Majority Whip.
Senator Cowsert, the fine of $100 per day to the board, would that be paid for by the taxpayers of such county, or should the board member be levied that fine and pay it personally? My question is because we have counties and cities in Georgia that dump raw sewage into streams on a daily basis and pay thousands of dollars a day in fines, and that doesn't seem to motivate them to fix the problems. I just wonder if the fine would be toward that board member to pay it personally, or would the county be subject to pay it?
It's directed to the board, and as a subdivision of the county, I suspect you're correct. The county would ultimately be bearing the tab.
Thank you. Senator Robertson.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I have spoken to election superintendents in some of our larger counties, and the only results that are not immediate are provisional ballots. All the other ones are immediate as far as the numbers of ballots, including the absentee ballot process that Senator Jordan brought up. And I want to clarify one thing I said there. I flipped the colors. The outer envelope is the yellow envelope, and that has the personal data, and the inside envelope that doesn't have the data is the white envelope. So I want to clarify that. But all of this information that the good chairman is talking about, this is all immediate information that they have, with the exception of the provisional ballots. And provisional ballots can easily be cleared up within the time period that he's established and even before. So, thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
I just have a couple of more concerns about the fines. When a department is working within a budget, then $100 may be a lot. I wouldn't just say $100 is nothing, because it could be. And also the staff. During this last election, they had to hire more staff in order to keep up with the influx and the large numbers that they were dealing with. So I would also consider that when you're doing this bill.
Yeah, I don't think it requires more staff. It would just require the existing staff to do their job quicker. I mean, this is not, as some of the senators know, this is instantaneously available after the data is entered before that vote is cast. And then you're just transmitting that, giving credit to the voters for voting.
Senator, you can so easily say that when you don't have to do the work. I could say it too, but
Okay.
Thank
how an office is run, how much staff, how much money, and all that stuff until we are in those shoes.
I'm sure
Thank
we'll
you,
hear
Mr.
from
Chairman.
them if that's a big burden on them.
Thank you, Senator. No more questions to the committee. We do have a public comment. I thank the senator for his bill, and I'll recognize now Mr. Nicholas Northam. All right, he waves. Thank you very much. No public input, no further discussion. Entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion we do pass Senate Bill 184, LC 280179.
And second. All those in favor indicate by the uplifted hand. And those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We'll now consider Senate Bill 188. Senator Caucuses, you get to stay right where you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will also be relatively brief presentation. This is simply requiring the Secretary of State to establish and maintain an election results reporting system so the public can access the results of the election. And it requires several things to be reported. The number of ballots cast and the types of ballots cast by precinct. And that would be also include the number of absentee ballots issued and returned, the number of absentee ballots that were certified, the number of the absentee ballots that were rejected, and also the number of the provisional ballots that were cast. Somebody mentioned that earlier, which is another type. So we just want this data available on the internet at a reporting site so everybody can look that up if they want to know the outcome. Now, it does require as soon as possible after the close of the polls, on the date of the voting, that these number of ballots issued and returned, et cetera, be reported. So we can know how many votes are out there being counted. And then before uploading any vote total, before giving us the answers, these sort of sequentially reporting votes as they get counted, you have to know the number of in-person ballots that were cast and the number of absentee ballots that have been received by the close of the polls, and then the number of provisional ballots cast in each precinct. So you heard people complaining that they kept hearing of different county boards of elections saying, well, we have found another X number of thousand ballots, et cetera. We're now, well, we don't know our total. There's another batch of ballots being found out here. Citizens have the right to know what's the total number of votes cast and what's the types of votes. And you ought to be able to know that by the close of business on election day. If they got to take time going through and tabulating, et cetera, so be it. But at least tell the citizens the number of votes that have been cast and the type of votes by precinct by the close of election day.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions? Questions or comments for Senate Bill 188? Thank you. Senator Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering why has that not been done now? I mean, do we know?
I don't want to give a glib answer, but I don't believe that the law has imposed that duty on them. Now, this is just basically transparency. You know, it's to require that to be done. Now, Senator Jordan's bill would sort of dovetail in with this, make it easier for them if they're able to go ahead and scan these ballots that are absentee ballots coming in before Election Day, not tabulate them or count them, because you don't want the other citizens say, oh, it's no use to go vote. That election's already decided. There's so many votes for candidate A or B. But to go ahead and have them scanned in, ready to be tabulated, should make it much, much quicker for them to give you those vote totals.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Senator Anavitarte.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing this bill. I just want to make one comment that I know my counties, in particular Paulding County, appreciates you bringing this bill. I know our election supervisor has noted that, I mean, she normally submits her credits within 2 weeks of Election Day, and even will make the argument that for early voting and absentee, it's instantly and can happen within 24 hours. So there's really no excuse for counties not to be able to turn this around pretty quickly, since this is pretty quick data. So I just want to thank you for making this a little bit easier for the counties who are doing what they need to be doing.
It can reduce the speculation and the conspiracy theories that something nefarious is going on if you just know, all right, here's the votes, they've been received, here's the types, and we'll give you, before you start giving out results, at least identify the number and the different types of ballots that have been cast.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none. Have a motion. Entertain a motion.
Yes, sir. I make a motion we do pass Senate Bill 188, LC number 280174.
All right, have a motion, a second by Senator Miller. All those in favor of SB 188 indicate with the uplifted hand. All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. That concludes the business of the committee for the morning. I want to thank the presenters and the committee for their work and their focus. We will have another Senate full committee meeting on Monday. What is that? February 21st at no. Thank goodness. At 4:45 p.m. p.m. That's 22nd. There you go. I can't get the calendar straight. So we'll have a regular committee meeting on February 22nd at 4:45 p.m. I will anticipate additional bills being assigned to subcommittee for the meeting after that. So I'll try to get that word out as quickly as I can. But those subcommittee meetings will not meet until Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. No, yeah, you keep the chicken. And we want to thank our friends who provided that. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.